Thank you so much for taking the time to speak about this. Obviously, you're someone that has been on the front lines of this, for lack of a better term, for a while now. That this goes beyond just the current administration. This goes years ago as well. From your experience, when you see these interactions play out, at least now and today in 2026, what have you seen? What have you experienced when immigration enforcement is conducting their operations?
Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection have been the epitome of state violence for many decades now. It is not new to our community to be terrorized with these forms of violence and psychological terrorism. I feel extremely grateful to be alive and to be in this struggle, considering the experiences that I've had in this movement and doing rapid response and photojournalism work in the past. In 2015, I was actually tackled by a Border Patrol agent who put their shotgun to my head and ordered me to delete photos. Otherwise, I'd be charged with terrorism charges simply for taking photos from public areas. So I've always been aware of the threat of this violence. And in 2019 and also last year in 2025, I was pulled over by ICE. Those were extremely threatening situations. And as I mentioned, I'm just very grateful to be alive and continue doing this work.
When you saw some of the videos from Minnesota from this past weekend, from a couple weeks ago, and even just since just when they've had that occupation there, what have you seen and what have you thought about it?
I'm very excited that so many people are outraged by what they've witnessed in Minnesota. And I'm also just reflecting on the fact that 2025 was the deadliest year in ICE's history, with over 30 people dying in custody. There have been multiple people killed in 2026. And while I'm grateful that the tragic experiences of Renee Good and Alex Pretti are elevating this conversation and awakening the nation, the truth is that our members and the immigrant community have been being murdered for years. So we need this outrage to not stop with Minneapolis, and we need systemic change.
When you saw some of those interactions, and now looking at, you mentioned your experiences in 2015 and 2019, was it similar? Could you say that the tactics were the same? What is happening there and going through your mind, and what were you doing and what were they doing that led up to that?
I think there's a lot of similarities with the situation. I mean, at the core of it, the individuals who have been murdered recently, being Alex and Renee and myself, and the situations I've been in, we are exercising our civil liberties to hold the government to account on the violation of constitutional rights of ourselves and our community members. And the lack of training that some ICE agents and Border Patrol agents have, coupled with the actual training, which is meant to be deadly, is clearly a lethal combination and one that needs to be stopped. We need to abolish ICE. We need to abolish Border Patrol, and we can no longer accept the federal government being in our streets and murdering civilians, whether they're documented or undocumented.
How do things escalate like that? What even happens there?
Yeah, interestingly enough, Tom, in all of my experience in safety training, including in classes to become a security guard in the state of New York, the number one role of safety and public officials is supposed to be de-escalation. This is the exact opposite direction of what we're seeing. It is Border Patrol and ICE who are escalating these circumstances from things being nonviolent civil practices of constitutional rights to deadly experiences and experience with people are harmed. So what we train at CCSM is an abundance of caution and a lot of de-escalation on the part of our volunteers. And we just hope that those skills can be implemented in situations where our community is put in danger.
This is a similar question, but I think it's a little bit different. Why do you think there's moments that things change, and why do you think that interactions like this are even happening? Why Why were you on the ground? Did Renee Good have to go and drive away? You know what I mean? What do you think is leading to that?
I think power is scared of accountability, and that's exactly what we're doing out there when we film ICE agents, is holding them accountable. As people and institutions and administrations feel that they are losing their power, in this case on the global scale, they're willing to do unspeakable things in order to enforce the control that they desire. And I think that's exactly what is happening with these agents. The other thing I'll say is also the ICE and DHS as a whole are recruiting from the most violent, most gun friendly, most anti immigrant parts of society in order to grow their force of agents. And so we can only expect for this to be the outcome.
In the immediate aftermath of Saturday, we heard that after Renee Good as well. The federal government officials come out and say that, well, they were impeding a federal investigation. They were getting in the way of these individuals that were trying to investigate a crime or try to get, as they've been calling, the worst of the worst. Do you think that these protests are impeding their investigation in a way that this use of force is justified in their eyes?
No, I do not. And it's something that was threatened against me in the 2019 incident, which they alleged that I was harboring, transporting, and smuggling undocumented folks, right? So they use these as intimidation tactics to get people to relinquish their rights. But the fact of the matter is that I have not been successfully prosecuted. The individuals in those videos would not have been successfully prosecuted. And the evidence that's been put before the public, despite the government's stark ability to try to suppress it, is showing the country what actually happened. And there's no doubt in the public's mind that these were ruthless murders.
There's been some more videos coming out from prior to Saturday of interactions that he had, that people are now saying, well, he was known and he was an agitator and this it was leading to this. What did you make of that?
We have the right to peacefully assemble. We have the right to film our government doing acts of atrocities. And if the argument is that we no longer have those constitutional rights, then I think obviously the public has a bigger problem to address. And I think that's why you're seeing organizations like the NRA even coming out to challenge the fact that the government is framing this as somebody was a hostile enemy of the police because they were legally bearing an arm, even though they did not have it in their hand. What they had in their hand was actually something more powerful, which is a camera, which told the story, which many people had in order to show what really happened that day.
And and here in New York and other places, I think California, they're talking. You mentioned accountability, and these protests are ways to perform that, if you will. There's this concept of universal constitutional remedies where they're trying to work in legislation and a mechanism for an individual to be able to sue these federal officials. What kind of impact do you think that would have if it was to be implemented?
I think it would at least have ICE agents and DHS agents hesitate to continue doing the things that they are, because there's some mechanism of accountability on the state level. Right now, they're getting the green light to do whatever they'd like from the federal administration. The federal administration is claiming that they have impunity just because they're federal agents. So I do think it's a step in the right direction, and we need to do everything that we can to hold them accountable for their crimes.
Yeah, along that same line of thinking, what does need to change here to calm things down, to be able to find, I don't know if it's a middle ground, but any sort of an end to violence in this case?
Yeah, I think the federal government needs to stop occupying U.S. cities over their agenda and distracting from all of the things that the administration does not want us to focus on, like the fact that our healthcare is being cut in order to pay these ICE agents. Our groceries are going up because they need to pay these ICE agents. All of the things that we require to continue living are being taken away in order to boost the federal administration's agenda. And in order for us to stop that, we need to get organized. We need to pass more legislation that prevents things like this from happening in the future, civil pathways to recourse, New York for All to prevent collusion between local law enforcement, dignity not detention to reduce the amount of facilities and therefore the activity in our region, care for immigrant families in order to have legal representation for immigrants that are detained. These are all different ways that we can continue to support our community and show that New York is a state that was built for, by, and of immigrants.
And you mentioned the agenda a couple of times there, and there are some that voted for this agenda that still support this agenda, that they believe that this action of mass deportation is making them safer because they're getting rid of, or that's a bad way to put it, but they are removing what they call criminals from the streets. What do you say to those people when they come back with that?
I mean, first and foremost, I don't believe that we should be buying into a good immigrant, bad immigrant narrative in this country. Second, that's not what the statistics show. The statistics don't show that the administration is primarily taking criminals. And second or third, I would say that the folks who are supporting this agenda are willing to sacrifice the constitutional rights of others when it goes against their political beliefs. And that is a slippery slope into having all of our constitutional rights diminished.
Let's before we finish up here, the capital region. I've heard, I've talked to some people, in the last few weeks about this, and they talk about this presence. We just saw a family reportedly today in the Shen High School that were taken. What's been happening on the ground here that you've seen, and what has the response been like? Like we've talked about some of this rapid response that you've been doing.
I think one of the beautiful things about the community's response to all of this is how much rapid response networks have been growing across the country. Even in the face of killings and murders that are happening, people are still willing to courageously go out and document what is going on and notify the community when ICE is present. Capital Region Sanctuary Coalition has been doing a phenomenal job in Albany. CCSM has been covering Northern Dutchess, Columbia, and Greene County. We know that people are being taken. There was a raid in Hudson, 2 raids in Hudson last week where people were separated from their families. And we also learned that the Albany School District is reporting that multiple of their students have been taken. It is really a time in which the aggression of this agenda is touching everybody's lives and therefore uniting us in a way that is necessary to challenge these illegal and unconstitutional acts.
You spoke about different bills, legislation, acts that could happen. And, we've seen in the past, it hasn't moved, right? I mean, we haven't, despite the calls for the changes, for passage. What is your message to the lawmakers? And in this case, the Democrats hold the power here in New York State. The Democratic governor as well. What's your message to them as they'll speak about the need to protect immigrants, but haven't passed the legislation to do so? What is your message to them?
I think public support and pressure has been building for our legislative leaders. We are delighted to see Andrea Stewart-Cousins come out in support of New York for All at the beginning of this legislative session. I believe we have more momentum than we've ever had on immigrant rights legislation, and I'm confident that if we continue to keep building this movement, we will come out of this legislative session with positive progress, New York for All, dignity not detention, care for immigrant families, and much more.